Have you ever had one of those, brilliant ideas, something you really believe in, but then you hit that wall, right? That big question, okay, how do I actually make this real? How do you turn it into something tangible, something you can show people, maybe even something that, well, creates value? That whole journey, from just a thought to something solid. And that's really what entrepreneurship is all about. It's where you stop just learning stuff and start doing stuff with it. So today, in this deep dive, we're going to peel back the layers on a really interesting training unit. Now, specific focus is on building and presenting entrepreneurial projects in refrigeration and air conditioning. But honestly, we're going to pull out the core principles, things that apply pretty much anywhere.
Exactly. Our mission here really is to cut through all the extra detail and give you a kind of shortcut. We want to lay out the essential instructions, the key requirements, and the critical skills you actually need to develop and pitch any kind of project effectively. We're using this training material basically as our guide. So you can get the whole picture fast from that first idea right through to, how it gets evaluated.
Okay, so keeping that mission in mind, let's dive into the actual training unit itself. What's its main purpose? What's it trying to achieve for someone starting out?
Well, fundamentally, it's about getting practical, moving past just theory. It's like a testing ground where skills you've already learned get applied to a pretty realistic entrepreneurial project. And it all leads up to actually presenting and getting that project evaluated. It's really where the rubber meets the road. The goal is to give you clear step-by-step instructions, not just to dream up a business plan, but to actually build it and to create a visual presentation that really sells it.
And looking at the specific objectives for the trainees, they seem pretty wide-ranging. It's not just about one thing. It looks like there's this dual focus, right? Mastering the actual tools, like getting really good with PowerPoint for business stuff, but also developing those crucial soft skills, like working well in a team, being persuasive, communicating clearly, even looking back and assessing your own work critically.
Absolutely. It's aiming for that full package of entrepreneurial readiness. The idea is you're not just someone who knows things, but someone who can actually do things, make things happen. And you see that depth reflected in the time estimate, too, about 12 hours just for this one unit. That's pretty significant.
Yeah, it signals that this isn't surface level stuff.
Right, and the tools they suggest using, like projectors and smart boards, that also points towards a very practical, hands-on approach. This isn't about just reading and memorizing. It's about building, tweaking, presenting, almost like a real-world simulation. That kind of active learning really sticks.
Okay, now for a lot of people listening, this is probably the key part. What do you actually have to make? What are the concrete things you produce in this unit?
Yeah, good question. It boils down to 3 main deliverables. First, there's a detailed written document, the integrated business plan. Second, you create an interactive business plan based on that document. And third, you actually build an initial product prototype, something tangible. Those are the 3 core outputs.
Let's dig into that integrated business plan first. It sounds comprehensive. What absolutely has to be in there for it to count? What are the non-negotiables?
Okay, so think of it like a strategic map for the venture. You kick things off with the executive summary, and this isn't just a quick intro. It's maybe the most important part. It's your short, sharp pitch for the whole thing. The project name, vision, mission, objectives, all condensed.
So like the elevator pitch, but written down.
Kind of, yeah. High impact. Then you get into the marketing plan. This is where you define exactly what you're offering, product or service. You really dig into who your target customers are, you analyze your competitors, and that includes doing a proper SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. And then you lay out your own marketing mix, the famous 4 Ps or sometimes more: product, price, place, distribution, and promotion. How are you actually going to reach your customers?
Okay, that makes sense. Marketing covered. What's next?
Then comes the operational plan. This details your costs, both the initial investment needed and the ongoing operational costs. And crucially, this is where you calculate your break-even point. You can talk more about why that's so important.
Definitely. And after operations.
Finally, the financial plan. This includes things like your projected income statement, your cash flow forecast, calculating the payback period for the investment, identifying potential funding sources, outlining your management team, and setting out a clear timeline for getting things done. It connects all the dots financially. It's a full blueprint.
That does sound incredibly thorough.
Yeah.
You mentioned the break-even point calculation in the operational plan. Why is that specific number so critical, especially for someone just starting out?
The break-even point. Look, it's not just some number for accountants. It's like, the first major reality check for your whole venture. It tells you, sometimes quite brutally, the exact amount you need to sell, whether it's units or services, just to cover all your costs. Nothing more, nothing less.
So basically it tells you if you're losing money or starting to make it.
Exactly. Below that point, you're in the red. Above it, you start generating profit. For an entrepreneur, knowing that number up front is, well, vital. It tells you if the whole idea is even feasible before you scale up. And related to that, the payback period calculation is also super important, especially if you're looking for investors. It tells everyone how long it's going to take for the initial investment to be earned back. It's a key measure of risk and potential return.
Interesting. Now, beyond that big written document, the training also mentions an interactive element, using some kind of software or builder for the business plan. And they even point out there are free online tools for this.
Right. It's about making it practical and accessible, not just theoretical. Using those tools can help structure your thinking, too. And then that brings us to the third deliverable, the initial product prototype, the prototype.
Okay. So what's the deal with the prototype? Is it supposed to be a perfect, finished product?
No, not at all. Actually, quite the opposite. The whole point of the prototype is fast learning and reducing risk. It's basically an early experimental model you create before you go into full production. Its job is to let you test out and evaluate your core idea without spending a fortune.
So like a mock-up or a basic version.
Exactly. The source material even distinguishes between different levels. You might have high-fidelity models, which are pretty detailed and look closer to the final thing, or you could have low-fidelity models, much simpler, maybe even just sketches or basic wireframes, just to get the general concept across. And they also mention rapid prototypes. Think things like 3D printing. These let you create something physical really quickly to test specific assumptions, maybe even with potential users. The key idea is fail fast, fail cheap. Learn what works and what doesn't before you commit huge resources.
That makes a lot of sense. So the prototype isn't about perfection, it's about validation.
Precisely. The requirement is that it needs to be, correct in representing the core idea, comprehensive enough to test what you need to test, and ultimately it should help validate whether your project can meet its success requirements. And this initial prototype concept, it's very closely related to what people in the startup world call an MVP, a minimum viable product.
Ah, I've heard that term.
Yeah, it's the simplest possible version of your product that still delivers core value. Enough to launch, get it in front of real customers, and start learning from their feedback immediately. It's all about maximizing learning while minimizing upfront effort and cost. You iterate based on real data, not just your own assumptions.
Okay, so you've done all this work. You've got the plan. You've got the prototype or MVP. Now comes the moment of truth, presenting it. This is where all that planning hits the spotlight. How does this training guide you to make that pitch really land effectively?
Right. The presentation is crucial. The unit specifies that each group delivers just one presentation, but the work can, and probably should, be shared among team members. There are some key ground rules. First, you have to follow general best practices for successful presentations. Second, and this is a big one, it's got a strict time limit, maximum 10 minutes.
Wow, 10 minutes. That's tight.
It is, and it forces you to be incredibly concise. You can't just read your whole report. You have to pull out the absolute essence. Third, it needs to be creative and engaging. You got to hold the audience's attention. Fourth, everyone in the group needs to participate actively. And finally, it needs to be submitted electronically, usually as a PowerPoint file. That 10-minute limit is a really powerful constraint for forcing clarity.
Yeah, I can see how that would sharpen your focus. But it's not just about the slides or hitting the time limit, is it? What about the personal skills needed to actually deliver a persuasive pitch? It feels like more than just presenting facts.
Oh, absolutely. It's hugely about the delivery. The source material highlights several key entrepreneurial skills needed here. First is clarity and effective communication. Can you explain your idea simply, clearly? Can you make the benefits for your audience immediately obvious, make it relevant to them?
Okay, clarity first. What else?
Second, persuasion. This is about making a compelling case, using strong arguments, showing you understand the market, and really highlighting what makes your offering unique, your customer value proposition, or CVP. You need to answer that question. What unique value are you providing? How are you helping customers do something better, faster, cheaper, or easier?
Right, the why.
Exactly. Third is self-confidence. You have to project belief in your idea and in your team's ability to pull it off. That comes across in how you speak, your body language, everything. Fourth, interaction and responsiveness. It's not a one-way street. You need to engage with questions, listen carefully to feedback, and respond thoughtfully and logically. Build that trust.
So being able to handle the Q&A effectively.
Definitely. Fifth, creativity and leadership spirit. Does the presentation show real innovation? Does it offer unique solutions? And does it demonstrate that you can actually lead the team to make this happen? And finally, perhaps underpinning it all, preparation and organization. You absolutely need thorough preparation, a logical flow to your pitch, and strict time management. Those are just table stakes for a professional presentation.
So you've done the work, you've made the pitch. How do they measure success in this framework? How are these projects actually graded? What does good look like?
Good question. The evaluation is split quite clearly into two chunks. The written business plan report itself is worth 30 marks, and then the PowerPoint presentation is worth 20 marks. So 50 marks in total for the whole project. Now, digging into the specifics. For that written report, the 30 marks are broken down. They look at the completeness or all the required sections there. They assess the depth, is there enough explanation and detail within each section. They check the clarity and correctness of the language in the original context. It's specified correct Arabic, but the principle is clear communication. And interestingly, they also explicitly score team cooperation in putting the report together. That's quite telling.
Yeah, acknowledging it's usually a team effort. What about the presentation marks?
For the PowerPoint presentation, the 20 marks cover a few things. How well does it meet those general successful presentation criteria we talked about? How is the design? Is it visually appealing and professional? Does the presentation effectively convey the key elements and components from the business plan? How well does it actually capture and hold the audience's attention? Is it engaging? And finally, did they stick to the time limit? Finishing on time gets specific marks, so it rewards both solid planning and sharp, engaging communication.
It's also interesting that the unit wraps up with self-evaluation. It asks trainees to reflect on their own learning, right? Assessing how well they mastered skills like using PowerPoint or collaborating or making decisions as a group.
Exactly. It brings it back to the individual's growth, reinforcing that the learning process itself is a key outcome, not just the final grade. It encourages reflection. And, thinking about that whole process, it's probably worth mentioning something the training highlights before you even get deep into the full business plan. That's the idea of an initial feasibility study. This is like a quick early check, a no-go decision gate for an idea. Is this even worth pursuing further?
So a preliminary check before the deep dive.
Right, and that's different from the final feasibility study, which comes later and is a much more detailed analysis focused specifically on profitability once the idea seems promising. These initial steps really emphasize validating your concept early before you invest too much time and effort. And ultimately, all these pieces, the studies, the plan, the prototype, the pitch, they all contribute to building and understanding your overall business model.
The business model, how everything fits together.
Yeah, essentially how your venture plans to create, deliver, and capture value. How it makes money, how it stays profitable, how it manages its resources. Concepts we touched on, like who your customers are, your distribution channels, how you manage customer relationships, your core infrastructure and resources, your main activities, key partners, and of course your cost structure, they all interlink to form that complete business model picture. It's a holistic view.
Wow. Okay, we've definitely covered a lot of ground today. It feels like a really practical journey mapped out here. From the nitty-gritty of planning and prototyping, right through to the art of presenting it persuasively, all under a clear evaluation structure. It's a solid look at making ideas happen.
It really is. And I think that's the key takeaway for listeners. This deep dive gives you a really powerful framework. It's a structured way to think about developing and communicating any significant idea, honestly. It doesn't have to be a formal startup. Maybe you're preparing for a big presentation at work, or exploring a new area you're curious about, or even just trying to get a personal project off the ground. This structured thinking can be incredibly useful. And while the principles are broad, you can see how in a technical field, like the original context of refrigeration and air conditioning, the precision needed in things like the operational costs, the financial projections, the payback period calculation, that becomes absolutely critical because the investments there can be really substantial. It's where theory meets potentially very expensive reality.
That's a great point. So thinking about everything we've unpacked today, here's something for you, the listener, to maybe mull over. What's a simple, everyday problem or frustration you've noticed? Something that if you applied this kind of structured thinking, the planning, the prototyping, the pitching mindset, could actually become an interesting little project, maybe even an entrepreneurial one. What's just one small step you could take, maybe even today, to define what your initial prototype might look like, or even just to jot down a rough outline for your executive summary.